Hello again, everyone. I'm here, as Kim said, with David Salle, the eminent and important painter, photographer, set and costume designer, film director and writer, but principally and passionately painter. Since the late 1970s, David has been working on paintings that offer meticulously crafted, surreal juxtapositions, colliding art history references with a mashup of popular culture sources like magazines, advertisements, cartoons, and comics, to produce works of distinctive originality and great verve. As one writer described his work, they are snippets and snapshots that, like fragments of forensic evidence, I like that particularly, suggest a story without giving away the game. But very recently, David has turned to another source, and that's what we're going to talk about today, artificial intelligence. For the past 2 years, he has been developing and using an AI program to create new work. And so I'm going to start by asking you, David, about a phrase you used when we spoke at your studio in New York, where you said you've long fantasized about an idea of unmoored space, and that you recognize that AI might provide this. Can you talk about that a little bit for us before we get into the mechanics?
We need to go back a few decades, several decades. There is a sort of inherent contradiction at the core of some aspect of Western painting, which is that our orientation to painting is fundamentally rectilinear. It's vertical, horizontal. Paintings are vertical, the earth is horizontal. And that orientation actually is the foundation of so much of the way we orient ourselves when we look at a picture, because representational painting is an illusion of creating the illusion of depth and space, but even non-representational painting still has a kind of analogy of space and
an orientation,
and one projects oneself into a space, but always with this kind of horizontal, vertical axis that is like something to hold on to. I'm certainly not the first one or the only one, but at the same time that this has been developing for 600 years, there's been a desire. Some artists have had a desire to conceive of space in a very different way, in a more fluid, malleable, multifaceted way. Then you can see this throughout, certainly for the 20th century, if not before. I mean, what is Cubism if not the attempt to render multiple views simultaneously, take the idea of the simultaneity of time and space and make some sort of pictorial equivalence. At the same time that I've always been oriented toward the vertical canvas, I've had some idea of a space that is more like the space of choreography, actually, coincidentally enough, where bodies move through space-time in a way that's less about the perpendicularity of painting. But I had this idea without being able to do much about it until a friend introduced me to the way that a computer transposes imagery into spatial coordinates, which could be, in the right hands, fundamentally different. So in terms of development of my work, it feels new, is new, literally, and yet it's the appearance, the physical appearance of something which I've been fantasizing about for a long time.
Been seeking for a long time, yes. How did you begin?
So, it doesn't really matter how I got introduced to the technology, but I met an young engineer, technologist, who was interested in developing a program specifically for the visual arts that did not rely on verbal prompts. And he began showing me what the machine could do, and I started analyzing. Let's go back up. The starting point was simply trying to address the question, why was all the AI-generated art that I saw terrible?
So bad.
Because it's all terrible. Well, what's so terrible about it? What was it that the machine was missing?
What did the machine not know?
What was it that had failed to understand? And of course, the people who built this neural network had no interest in the visual arts and no understanding of how information passes from one frame of reference to another. The conventions by which that is accomplished, developed over hundreds of years, something that simply wasn't part of their training model. So we had to start from scratch. What does the machine not understand? Number one. Number two, how do we get it to understand the world the way a painter looks at the world? So we could go to some slides and see if that works. Oh, this first one, okay. So the first slide, first image is working with a training model for the artificial intelligence based on a very select group of images that I put together from artists of early 20th century to illustrate certain principles of how an image is broken down into patterns of lights and darks, et cetera, et cetera. So this first image.
Perspective, I presume.
Sorry?
Perspective, volume, that kind of thing.
Yeah, to kind of, what are the pictorial conventions by which imagery is broken down? So the first image I'm showing is after about a year, it was a long process of honing the training model, still, at this point, still using verbal prompts. The machine made an image which, this is the first image that seemed interesting in its own right. It was almost like something that might have been, made by Picabia or some artist of a kind of deliberately perverse bent. It's quasi-surrealist, quasi-whatever, without a label to it. But it was interesting, compelling enough to want to go forward, but still not art in its own right yet. So the essential thing that the machine did not understand, I determined, was it did not know what an edge is in painting. Because an edge, if you think about it, where two forms come together, forms an edge, it's simple enough, everyone knows what that means. But in painting, how that edge is expressed, it can be at the heart of someone's style. If you think about, let's say, an edge in Matisse, or an edge in Alex Katz, or an edge in Picasso, or an edge in whoever's work, Cecily Brown, for example. Each one of those edges has a very different character, and that character expresses the intent to a certain degree of the artist. It has an intentionality, it has a consciousness, and that forms the thing that we call style. So how to teach a machine, which has no consciousness really, the process of transposing a simple physical fact into an expressive mark.
Because for the machine, it's all pixels, isn't it?
Right. So, yes, thank you. In the machine translation from the world to the screen, everything is a pixel, and all pixels are essentially equal. It's just another pixel, a pixel of different color. And not only that, but the machine because it is fundamentally an averaging device that averages what it has taken
any
in.
Image that it's,
in the interest of trying to predict the next move. It's essentially, it's an averaging / predictive mechanism. So it's always trying to guess the next move. Ergo, it kind of guesses wrong. It guesses wide of the mark, because maybe it's this, maybe it's not, maybe it's that, doesn't really know. So it's not only is it a pixel, but it's also vague. And vagueness has no place in painting. There's no real place in art. So we tried to find a way to impart consciousness of where there is an edge, there is an intention, and that intention is expressed with a mark.
So I liked your phrase that you used, that you sent the machine to art school. So just tell us quickly, what was the curriculum?
Okay, so yeah. I realized the machine had to be sent to art school, a very crash course art school. We didn't have 4 years to waste.
Art intensive.
So I taught the machine the things that I had been taught as a child by my first art teacher. Value pattern, how to create a sense of volume using value pattern, spatial organization, perspective. It sort of understood that, but not really. But most importantly, this idea of what is that a mark or a line is also a shape. And a shape also has a character, which has an expressive quality.
And you taught it this by feeding it paintings?
I taught it by giving examples, the way you would teach a person. Like, look at this. And it actually is a very good student when you're very specific about what it should look at. Let's see, so there's another piece to this, which is after watching how the machine worked, it essentially scans whatever it's looking at for similarity and dissimilarity. It scans for similarity and it links those similarities into statistical probabilities. I thought maybe what would be appropriate is to find an image that is more scannable than not. And that, I mean, again, this is someone who's I'm not a technologist in the slightest. I don't know if this is even accurate, but to me that meant something which was already fragmented into coherent shapes. I had made this painting in 1999, which is itself based on a 19th century opera backdrop. I mean, it doesn't really matter what the painting is, but it's the way the painting is constructed is by these interlocking puzzle piece-like discrete shapes of different colors. I feel like there's feedback. I don't know if it's annoying to the audience. When I painted that painting, it made me think of another painter's work, the group of paintings that Andy Warhol made that were unknown until after his death. They were just camouflage, the patterns of camouflage themselves, in which Andy was able to highlight his very serious gifts as a colorist. And what I mean by colorist is someone who can make color harmonies in a way which is analogous to a musical chord. It's not so much that we like that shade of pink or we like that shade of blue. It's that the concordance of all of these specifically chosen colors all together creates a harmony which works on the emotions in very much the way musical harmony does. So that became a little flash of inspiration that these color harmonies could be applied to this puzzle piece-like breakdown of pictorial reality. And the result was this series of paintings from 2001 called the Pastorals, in which you see the romantic image of the couple in a landscape with the water in the foreground and mountains in the background and trees and so forth. That image is intact at the same time that it's broken down into component parts, in addition to which auxiliary images are incorporated either as insets or as overpainting. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right, so another example of these pastoral paintings from about 25 years ago. You can see the different palettes appropriated from Andy's work. So this was starting point A, at which point the observation that the machine was lacking in its understanding of edges kicked in. So this was training model number 2. These are paintings from 4 or 5 years ago in which the forms are rendered with direct brush strokes, very kind of direct painting. The form is depicted very efficiently and without a lot of fuss involved. So that's the kind of example that we were trying to teach the machine. If you could understand the way those two forms come together to make that edge, then we're getting somewhere. This is an example of what the machine produced after the second round of training. That finally we're seeing that malleable, almost unmoored, fractured space It's the same. You can see the DNA of the original pastoral image is still intact to a certain extent, but things are misplaced or displaced or simply repositioned according to some logic which the machine is executing on its own, which frankly is not very well understood. But it provides what for me was a very fertile access point to this more malleable space, which I had been looking for in my mind's eye for decades. And it invited yet another intervention. This is still, at this point, it's still not art yet in my terms. Mm-hmm. So that this is another example. I mean, pretty interesting, but still not something I would think is a complete experience. So that background became that painting.
So really, I mean, we talked about this a bit.
Yeah.
You're using the AI in the way that Cunningham used the I Ching. I mean, which I mentioned, the way that Merce Cunningham, the choreographer Merce Cunningham, for example, might have used the I Ching as a freeing mechanism from your own parameters or unconscious inclinations.
The overriding impulse here is not so much to make thing A versus thing B, it's to get outside the confines of one's own head. Mm-hmm. And as Merce and other artists used chance operations, as it was then known, whether it was from the I Ching or just from some other privately devised system, the reason to do that was not out of some sort of misplaced tourism. It was simply to not be confined by what you already know. So what's one way to do that is to give the decision-making process over to something out of your hands.
Yes, that doesn't have presuppositions or
because every choice comes with a history and taste and so forth. Yeah, okay. So next slide. This isn't just another example. So this is a finished artwork where the images that are recognizable are painted on top of the backgrounds that were produced by the machine, and the feeling is one of a dialogue between the two levels of pictorial interpretation. It's as if the overpainted images are emerging out of the background, or in some cases submerging back into the background. This is another recent painting where there's almost a complete merging of the two, or actually more than two, ways of rendering an image, which reaches a kind of a loftiness, there's a kind of buoyancy to the work, which I like. And some of them, the distortions that the AI created are left more or less intact, and some of them are more or less disappeared into the final painting.
But I think it's important to say that all of this is meticulously painted by you over which may not be entirely clear.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't necessarily matter. I mean, all that matters is the end result. But it's this is like a tautology. If you're a painter, every square inch of the painting is something that is considered. So even if it's, this one thing was, when I was a student, it was very hard to get your mind around this idea of how chance operations can work with being a conscious artist at the same time. It's not that you're really giving up authorial control. It's simply giving you another palette of things from which to choose.
There's a lot of apprehension about artificial intelligence, and people are afraid of a kind of takeover. But the way you're talking about it here suggests that it's a tool, and I think you or someone else, maybe this is from your book, that photography was thought to herald the death of painting when it arrived, and yet it became a tool for people like Degas to use.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think that's the same for artificial intelligence, or are there actually more anxiety-inducing kind of implications?
Well, I'm certainly aware of there's a tremendous anxiety about AI in society generally. I think in some walks of life, in some creative professions, it's, I'm sure, a very real concern, a very real worry. The way that I'm using it is, I think, the way most artists would, not that I'm setting myself as an example, but just practically speaking. One has to, I mean, to make anything, one has to have an idea of what you're looking for, what you want to see, and either the machine is going to help you achieve that or not, and if not, then forget about it. In my way of working, it is so clearly a tool, a very extremely useful tool, and one that I'm quite grateful for. Came along just at the right moment. There's also a thing of, in life, the thing that you really need sort of appears when you really need it. Maybe I didn't really need it before, but now I'm ready to use it. Mm-hmm. All that being said, it's so completely under my control. It only knows what I have taught it.
What you have taught it.
It's really a student of mine, mm-hmm. who I have tricked into contributing something. The machine, I really think artificial intelligence, as it pertains to the visual art of painting, is a misnomer. It's more artificial unintelligence. It really has no idea what it's doing. That is totally its value. Its value is precisely in that it doesn't know what rules it's breaking. It simply doesn't know, well, it doesn't know anything. It doesn't know, it doesn't know, period. It's a replicating device plus distortion. Now that might sound easy, well, you can just do it yourself. It turns out that distortion on that level is very difficult to do. One could do it, but it would take a very long time. Mm-hmm. You'd have to make hundreds and if not thousands of tests to arrive at what is a useful distortion where the machine can do it instantly, or in a matter of minutes. It is truly a labor-saving device, that like just any other power tool. It's now, down the road, will the machine really acquire taste and consciousness and intentionality? Possibly, I don't know, I'm not a technologist, I doubt it. Mm. For it to replace a painter specifically would require a partnership with advanced robotics. As far as I know, robotics is nowhere near at the point to replicate the human hand, although that could happen. If and when it happens, we'll worry about it at the time. In the foreseeable future, the worry of its replacing the intention of the artist, I think, is misplaced.
But now that the machine is trained, so to speak, to produce the kind of work that is useful to you, will it go on getting better at that? Or is it only getting better at reproducing what you need?
Well, the answer to that, Roz, is a little bit complicated, because it could get better, but not be less useful. Mm-hmm. What better means is, will I be able to respond to it in a way which is useful to me personally?
Yes.
The machine could get better, but actually be getting worse.
For you?
Well, yeah, because it has to, first of all, it has to move me in some way. So it might be evolving, but to what end is it's unlikely to be an improvement. Mm. It's doing exactly what I want it to do right now. I don't really want it to do more. If it does more, I'll decide when I see that. It could do something different, which might be interesting. It's really important to, I don't know how to put it conceptually, that the machine is not making art. The machine is creating a condition to which I respond, which, on a good day, results in art.
I want to leave just a couple of minutes for questions, because I'm sure there will be some, but I just want to ask whether there's interest in AI among your peers, your fellow painters, or
None.
not? Really, none?
Hostility.
Interesting, yeah.
No one's expressed the slightest interest in getting in on the game.
I wondered.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, they don't need it, apparently. I mean, I'm older than they are, so maybe
Yes.
when they're my age, they'll get to it. But no, it's something that, as I tried to express it at the beginning of the talk, it comes along at a time and fills a certain almost fantasy that I've had for a long time, which is very particular to me.
To you.
And I don't think anyone else would even have been interested. The fact that I was able to make something out of it is a result of both the accident of timing and also the fact that this was on my mind for decades. But it doesn't really have implications for painting in a broader sense. I'm skeptical about that, frankly.
We have 2 minutes for questions, if anyone would like to ask those.
Not a single question.
Yes? Yes. I think, hang on one sec, someone's going to bring a mic.
Hello. I would like to ask if there is a point where using the art, using the AI as a tool becomes depending on AI as depending on AI, period. You're not using it, but you are depending on it.
Did you understand?
Is there a point at which you could become dependent on the AI as a tool?
Just the tool anymore.
Oh, it's not just, yeah.
Well, everything is a tool. I mean, it's like saying, could you become dependent on paintbrushes? I mean, painting, let's be realistic. Painting is a physical act. The painting happens at the end of a paintbrush. It is not a conceptual phenomenon. It is 9/10 physical phenomena. I've become very dependent on paintbrushes. I actually can't paint without them. Is that a problem? I think the question is just, it answers itself. If, I'm dependent on coffee. I mean, couldn't get here without the coffee that we had at lunch. Should I regret that? I don't know. I mean, to me, that's one of those worrying responses that if you used it, you wouldn't be worried about it. Just use it. Fine. If you're dependent on it, fine. Say it again?
Well, let me ask the question another way, which is something I wanted to ask, which is, do you think this is a tool you will go on using long term?
I think I won't make any predictions. I'll go on using it as long as it's interesting.
As long as it's feeding something.
And I think that if you look at my work as a whole over 45 years, it's involved in lots of different things, and it has changed a lot over time, but it has pretty consistently been a kind of setting up something so that I can then respond to it. And the response is built into the construction from the beginning. It's easy to see it in real life. It's hard to describe it. But in that regard, this is simply another encounter that I have set up for myself in a way to trick myself into a different response pattern. If it becomes predictable, then get rid of it. There are other things in life that do that. I guess the idea of dependence is, if you look at most artists' work, it's a very interesting model. It hadn't occurred to me. I would have expressed it differently, I would say. Most artists' work is heavily dependent on something. Let's take the dependence away from everybody and see what. I mean, it would be a very interesting, provocation. We just don't think of it in those terms, right? Because it's not a machine. Yeah. I mean, I think we should, I'll give you an example. This is a trivial example, but it's an example nonetheless. I was talking to Alex Katz the other day, and he was saying something like, "Oh yeah, I had to stop using the color yellow because that yellow. Whenever I got into trouble, I could make a painting work by using yellow. So I had to spend a year without yellow." He was dependent on yellow.
Well, on that cheery note, thank you very, very much, David. So fascinating.
Thanks for coming.